knights and ladies, I believe we have at last devised the perfect television show. These two gentlemen are its leading characters. They are a father and son team, defenders of the underdog. Each week they find a new maiden in distress or a new dog, as the case may be, and thus we have a completely different story, yet retain the same magic ingredients. Being father and son not only gives them some excellent Freudian conflicts, but also enables them to gang up on a single opponent. Of course, the son furnishes the fire enthusiasm, while the father is the brains of the team. In each and every story, we have a dramatic courtroom scene. In the court of King Arthur, our heroes ride horseback for the benefit of Western fans, and for a little extra fun, I have quietly sharpened the lances, thus assuring us some excellent operating room scenes. I don't see how it can miss. Of course, just as no rose is complete without thorns, so no television show is complete without the following.
Would you send the car around, please? Thank you. Eve! Eve! That kid has been in here again.
I'm sorry, Howard.
Look, if his mother can't control him, I won't have him in the house at all.
Well, I'm sure it wasn't Addie's fault.
You're always making excuses for her, aren't you? And Gilly. You know, he's a little nuisance.
Well, he doesn't have any friends of his own, and he can't stay with Addie all the time. She has her work to do.
I just can't stand having other people's children around. Of course, it would be different if we had one of our own.
Howard...
I know. You want Addie here, so I guess I'll have to put up with the boy. You know, Eve, Addie is a luxury. We already have 3 servants, and we don't really need a housekeeper.
Excuse me. Oh, has Gilly been in here again?
Yes, he's been in here again.
I'm sorry, Mr. Raiden. He's been with me in the kitchen all afternoon. He must have wandered off while I was counting the laundry.
Addie, you like working for us here, don't you? You get a good wage. Your boy's going to a very good school. You both have a home. All I ask is that you just keep him out of my study.
I'm sorry, Mr. Raiden. It won't happen again.
Yeah, please. Please see that it doesn't, huh?
Well, who's Mr. Lewis?
He's the baseball coach.
Oh?
He put Tommy Harris on third base and I pitched.
Uh-huh.
I got everybody out except John Casey.
Well, he's a big boy.
He's almost 12.
Of course he is.
If I do all right in practice tomorrow, I'll pitch against St. Martin's on Thursday.
Well, that's wonderful, Gilly.
Hey, Mom, you know what I got on my arithmetic test?
No, what?
I got 92.
Well, that makes me very proud.
Mom,
Hmm?
you know what?
What?
I like this room. It's so pretty.
Now, look, Gilly, you've got to be out of this room before Mr. Raiden gets home.
When is that?
No, in about an hour, I guess.
Okay, Mom.
Okay. Addie, will you come in the kitchen and help me with this silly animal? He just won't hold still for the liniment I'm supposed to put on him. Doesn't he know it's for his own good? Come on, Smidge, let's be brave about the whole thing.
Put that down. You're not even supposed to be in this room at all.
Mr. Rayton. Oh, Gilly.
Do you know what that clock was worth?
How could you do such a thing?
I didn't mean it. It slipped.
Eve? Eve?
I didn't mean to break the clock, Mrs. Rayton. I'm sorry.
It's all right, Gilly. It's all right.
Yes, it's perfectly all right, isn't it? You can do anything you like here, Gilly. Mrs. Radin doesn't mind.
Howard, please. Gilly, you run along. I promise I'll pay for the clock, Mr. Rayton.
Not out of my money, you won't. I want you and your son out of here, Addie, for good.
You don't mean that.
I do mean it. I put up with this business for your sake, but this is the end of it.
Well, we'll keep Gilly at the school. You won't have to see so much of him.
I won't have to see him at all, and neither will you. I'll give you a month's salary, but I want you out of here on Saturday.
He means it this time. He really means it. I knew it wouldn't work. Things could have been so different. Gilly? Gilly?
I didn't mean to do it.
It's all right, Gilly. Sit down. I'll get you some cake and milk.
It was just so pretty, I wanted to touch it.
I know, Gilly.
Mr. Rayton's very angry with me, isn't he?
Sarah. I left Mr. Rayden's milk on the stove, ma'am.
Oh, fine.
Is he feeling any better?
No, he's gone to bed. I'll take it up to him.
Good night, Mrs. Rayden.
Good night, Sarah. Thank you. Okay, Miss Mitch. Come on. Well, come on, silly. Let's go. Nice someone.
Eve! Eve!
He was all right when we went to sleep, and then he was calling out to me.
Howard? Howard? Well, don't just stand there. Get a doctor. Call Dr. Borgman.
I'll call him.
Howard? He's not breathing.
But there was nothing wrong with him.
I think he's dead. You always wanted this to happen. You've done this to my son. You've killed him.
Mr. Malloy, I'm so glad you could come.
Well, I wanted to see you again, Mrs. Strain. I've just left Mrs. Raden.
Oh, how is she?
She asked if you could bring her a change of clothes.
Can't bear to think of her in that awful place. Do you know if she's been sleeping? She's always had trouble sleeping. I can't believe that all this is happening. It's that woman's fault. That awful old woman.
What woman?
Mrs. Raden.
You mean Howard Raden's mother?
Yes. She hates Eve. She's always hated her. She hates Eve just because she married her son. That's why she accused Eve of killing him.
It's the state who made the accusation, Mrs. Strain. Now, it's my job to prove they're wrong, and you can help me do it.
I've told you everything I know.
Have you?
Well, what about that drunken gardener? He was terribly angry at Mr. Raden when he fired him. It could have been him. Why didn't the police arrest him?
There wasn't any case against the gardener.
Well, there isn't any case against Eve.
Isn't there? They think there is. They say she bought the poison that caused Raden's death. She gave him the milk that contained the poison. And worst of all, she might have had a motive.
It's not true.
Howard Raden's mother says it is. She claims Eve wasn't much of a wife to her son.
She's a nasty, vicious old woman.
And she knows about Jack Wentworth.
What does she know?
I don't know. What do you know?
Nothing.
Nothing? Well, the question is, will the jury believe her? Will they believe that Eve was an unfaithful wife?
Do you think they will?
I'm not a fortune teller, Mrs. Strain, but I've been studying the testimony at the preliminary hearing. As far as I'm concerned, they couldn't convict Jack the Ripper on the evidence they've got.
Do you mean that?
Well, they've only got one witness, an hysterical, possessive mother. She'll try and make Eve sound like a Jezebel. Maybe that's how the jury will see her at first. When I put Eve herself on the stand, that'll be a different story.
Then it'll be all right. They'll let her go.
I've been a criminal lawyer for 10 years, Mrs. Strain, and I've done pretty well. You know how? I never believed I was going to lose a case.
I do.
Mrs. Raden, you were living with your son and his wife at the time of his death.
I was.
Was your relationship with your daughter-in-law a friendly one?
We understood each other.
Would you describe your son's marriage as happy?
I would not.
Was there friction between them?
Howard did his best to hide it from me, but I knew the truth.
What truth?
That she'd married him for his money.
And what makes you say that?
She was wildly extravagant with my son's income. She spent over $20,000 a year on clothes alone.
Did he object to her spending so much?
Not at first. He was too infatuated. She took advantage of Howard. I tried to make him see the truth, but he wouldn't listen. A man has to learn those things for himself.
Would you say he finally did learn the truth about his wife?
Not all of it. He never knew the worst part. That she was a filthy little...
Objection, Your Honor. Prosecution is encouraging the witness to be abusive.
Mr. Halstead, please confine yourself to questions of fact.
Yes, Your Honor. Then, to your knowledge, your son knew nothing of the affair between his wife and Jack Wentworth.
Objection.
Well, I'll rephrase the question. Was your son aware that Eve Raden had been seeing Jack Wentworth?
He knew nothing about it. It was the one thing about her that I couldn't bear to tell him.
Did you ever see them together?
I did. It was on a Friday afternoon. I'd left the house that morning to go to a committee meeting of a charity organization to which I belonged. But I returned sooner than I expected, and sooner than my daughter-in-law expected.
You haven't told me anything about yourself.
Well, there's nothing much to tell. I'm married, I'm well, and I'm keeping busy.
Go ahead, tell me you're happy. Huh? Tell me what a great guy Howard is. Tell me how you never regretted marrying him. Not even for a minute.
And then tell me you don't want to see me anymore.
But I do want to see you. There's no reason why I shouldn't.
Let's have lunch next week, huh?
I'd love to. Oh, hello, Mother. I thought you weren't going to be home until this evening.
Committee postponed the bazaar for a week. The chairman is ill.
Oh, this is Jack Wentworth, an old friend. This is Mrs. Radin, Howard's mother.
Are you an old friend of my son's, Mr. Wentworth?
Yes, I met him once. I think I better be running along.
You must come and have dinner with us sometime, Mr. Wentworth.
Yes, I'd like that. Look, Eve, I'll be at the plaza in case you want me for anything, huh? Say goodbye to Eddie for me, huh? Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Mrs. Radin.
Then you actually saw them in each other's arms?
I heard them and I saw them.
You said nothing about this to your son?
I didn't like to carry tales. Besides, she would have denied it. She could make Howard believe anything.
Mrs. Radin, did your son and his wife quarrel on several occasions?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, there was a quarrel the day before his death, wasn't there?
Yes, there was. I was present at the time.
Would you please tell the court what happened?
Eve left the house early that morning on one of her frequent shopping trips. When she returned about 7 o'clock that evening, Howard and I were in the study.
I can't understand why Eve didn't tell me about these. She should have come to me.
I'm afraid she doesn't tell you everything, Howard.
Oh, Mother, please.
Hi. Oh, boy, these new shoes are killing me. What's the matter? You both look as if someone died. In the stock market again, huh?
Do you know what these are?
No idea.
Well, maybe you'd better take a look at them. A man came to my office today. He came to see me about you. He was from a collection agency. Seems you haven't paid these bills, so the store forwarded them to an agency for collection. It was very embarrassing.
Poor darling.
Eve, you owe $7,000.
Well, the price of hats has gone up.
Hats, furs, shoes, jewelry.
Howard, you sound like an elevator operator. Don't be so dull.
I don't think there's anything dull about $7,000.
I think it's the dullest thing I've heard all day.
Eve, you spent $7,000. And that's only in one store. We haven't heard from the others yet.
Well, tell them to wait. They take long enough with their deliveries. Let them wait for their money.
Eve, darling, you don't seem to understand. These bills are weeks overdue.
Howard gives you a good allowance. What do you do with it?
Spend it.
It's no use, Howard.
Oh, just a minute. Eve, Mother and I have been talking this over.
Oh? And what did Mother have to say?
She reminded me about your annuity, the money Gary left you.
Well, thank you, Mother. I might never have thought of that.
Eve, you cannot go on spending money this way. You know the condition of the stock market lately. Most of my shares are at rock bottom, and I just can't afford to sell until they go up.
Mother's always right, isn't she? All right, Howard. Punish me. Send me to bed without supper. I'm dieting anyway.
Eve, I'm not going to pay these bills. You'll have to pay them yourself.
You don't mean that.
I do mean it. After all, you have $10,000 of your own money. It's only fair that you should use that to pay these bills.
But Howard, you always wanted me to look well. You always said I should buy nice clothes.
Within reason, darling, for heaven's sake. Within reason.
All right, darling. I'll go to the bank tomorrow. I just hate it when you're angry with me.
She never had any trouble fooling Howard. He was always very weak as far as she was concerned. Of course, she didn't go to the bank the next day. She never intended to.
Mrs. Radin, have you ever seen this before?
Yes, I have.
It's a check made out for $10,000 to the order of Eve Radin. Would you read the signature on this check?
It's signed Jack Wentworth.
Would you tell the court where you first saw this check?
It was in her room.
In your daughter-in-law's bedroom?
Yes. It was the day after Howard died. I went into her room after Eve had left the house. I thought I might find something from this man Wentworth. A letter, perhaps. I found the check. It was in a bureau drawer.
Mrs. Radin, are we to understand that you found this check among your daughter-in-law's possessions?
Yes.
And you appropriated it without her permission?
I had to. I wanted to prove...
Very well, Mrs. Radin. Mr. Malloy, was the defense aware of the manner in which this evidence was obtained?
We were, Your Honor.
And you wish to make no objection?
No, Your Honor. We believe the exhibit will be explained by the case for the defense. We're willing to accept it in evidence.
Very well, you may proceed, Mr. Halstead.
Mrs. Radin, what did you think when you first saw this check?
I knew that no man would give that much money to a woman unless he was a great deal more than a friend.
And so you demanded the autopsy. The autopsy which proved your son was murdered.
Yes.
Mrs. Radin, you knew your son suffered from a very serious ulcer condition.
Yes, but I also knew that he took good care of himself.
Isn't it true that Mrs. Radin brought him a glass of warm milk each night before going to bed?
Yes, and that's how she did it. She put poison in the milk. She thought that we would believe that my son's illness was the cause of his death. But I knew better. I knew that she'd killed my son.
Just to keep you from becoming too engrossed in our story, the ground rules of television provide this cooling off period, after which we shall all be back. Welcome back to the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. We missed you. The second half of what really happened will begin after we cross this 1-minute moat.
You may proceed with your witness, Mr. Malloy.
Mrs. Radin, how long were you married to Howard Radin?
About 2 years.
You had been married before?
Yes, my first husband was killed in an auto crash about 7 years ago.
I see. What was your relationship with Jack Wentworth before your marriage to Howard Radin?
We were very good friends.
Was there, any romantic interest?
Yes. Before I met Howard.
Where were you living at that time?
I was sharing an apartment with Addie.
With Adelaide Strain, the woman who is now your housekeeper?
Yes, we were both widows.
She had a child, didn't she? A boy named Gilbert?
Yes.
So you married Howard Radin, and a year later, Adelaide Strain came to work for you as your housekeeper.
Well, Adelaide had been a wonderful friend to me. I was very happy when Howard said we could hire her.
The boy came with her?
Yes. Addie and I arranged for him to go to a school in the neighborhood.
A private school?
The Maynard School for boys.
Now, what happened to Jack Wentworth after your marriage to Howard Radin?
He went to South America. He's a mining engineer.
And when did he return?
Just this January.
You heard Mrs. Radin's testimony about finding you and Jack Wentworth together. Was that the first time you saw him after his return?
Yes, that was the first time. But it wasn't the way she said.
You didn't embrace him.
But she made it sound all wrong. I mean, I didn't even know that Jack was in town or that he was coming to see me. It was a surprise Addie had arranged. We've got 5 years to catch up on. I want to hear all about it.
Well, you remember the company I told you about? The one working the mine up in the Andes?
Oh, yes, I remember.
Well, it took us almost a whole year to set up operations, but it paid off. We took millions of dollars of tin out of that mining. I'm rich.
You really deserve it, Jack.
I'll deserve it or not, I've got it.
Oh, it's just marvelous.
Thank you. Yeah, hand's a little heavier now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, on the way over here, I passed by a jewelry store and I saw a bracelet that I would have loved to have.
I have everything.
Everything. Well, you haven't told me anything about yourself.
Well, there isn't much to tell. I'm married and I'm well and I'm keeping busy.
You haven't said you were happy.
Didn't I?
I know. You're going to tell me you're happy. You're going to tell me what a great guy Howard is.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to tell me you've never regretted marrying Howard, not even for a minute. And then you're going to tell me you don't want to see me anymore.
No.
No? Let's have lunch next week, huh?
I don't think we should. Hello, Mother. I didn't think you were going to be home until this evening.
Oh, is that what you thought? Well, the committee have postponed the bazaar for a week. The chairman is ill.
This is Jack Wentworth. He's an old friend. This is Mrs. Radin, Howard's mother.
Well, how do you do, Mrs. Radin?
How do you do? Are you a friend of my son's, Mr. Wentworth?
Well, I met him once. I think I should be running along.
Why don't you come to dinner sometime? I'm sure my son would be only too pleased to see an old friend of Eve's.
Well, thank you. That would be very nice. Eve, if you want me, I'll be at the plaza.
I'll see you to the door.
No, please. Just say goodbye to Addie for me.
I will.
Goodbye, Eve.
Goodbye.
Pleasure, Mrs. Radin.
I knew what Mrs. Radin was thinking, but it wasn't true. I was happy to see Jack, but that was all.
Did you see Jack Wentworth after that?
Well, yes, but there was nothing secretive about it. We met a couple of times for lunch or a cocktail.
Mrs. Radin, we've heard about a quarrel which took place the day before your husband's death. Do you recall that occasion?
Yes. We quarreled. But it didn't happen the way Mrs. Radin said. It wasn't that way at all. Boy, these shoes are killing me.
Yes, it must be very tiring, all this shopping. Do you know what these are?
No.
Maybe you'd better take a look at them. A man came to my office this morning from a collection agency. You haven't paid these bills. How do you think I felt about that?
Oh, Howard, I'm sorry.
You owe $7,000, Eve. $7,000. And that's only from one store. We haven't heard from the others yet.
I never realized how much I was spending.
The stock market has been acting very badly lately. Most of my stuff is at rock bottom. I just can't afford to sell any shares.
Howard, you never discussed money with me. If you'd explained, I would have tried to economize.
Howard gives you a good allowance every month, but it never seems to be enough for you.
I don't know why it is. I'm always running short.
I know why. It's dear old Addie, isn't it? Do you think I don't know the money you spend on her every month? And I'm paying her more than she's worth.
And that school she sends her boy to. It's absurd. Sending him to an expensive private school.
But he has to go to the Maynard school. It's the only school close by. Besides, Addie does pay part of the tuition.
There was never any need for Addie around here in the first place.
But she's my friend.
And don't think she hasn't taken full advantage of it.
We pay her $500 a month, and what does she do for it?
Nothing, except arrange a few flowers.
I'm going to fire her.
No.
I'm going to fire her.
All right, Howard, what do you want me to do about the bills?
My mother and I have been talking this over. She thinks you ought to pay them yourself.
Seems only right to me.
But how?
Well, what about the annuity Gary left you?
But I don't think there's enough.
Well, it should be over $10,000. I want these bills paid. And I want them paid by the end of the week. You can go to the bank tomorrow and draw out the money.
I'll go to the bank tomorrow. But I knew I couldn't go to the bank. There was really only one place I could turn.
Eve? Oh, you look beautiful. Well, this is certainly a lucky break for me, seeing you again so soon.
You may not think it's so lucky when you hear the reason.
Oh? Oh, thank you. Daiquiri?
You remembered?
Daiquiri, please.
I'm in trouble, Jack. I've made a terrible mess of things.
Oh, how terrible.
You remember that annuity Gary left me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's all gone, every cent. I kept drawing on the capital.
You've been helping Addie with Gilly's school fees. I know, she told me.
Well, the fees are high, and he needs a lot of things. But I've been extravagant with myself. I can't help it. I just love clothes.
Hey, you, should have them.
I owe a lot. $7,000.
You know, 5 years ago, that was all the money in the world as far as I was concerned. Right now, it doesn't sound like so much, though.
Might as well be $1 million. Howard insists I pay it. See, he thinks I still have my own money.
Well, he can afford to pay it.
But he won't. He's furious with me. He even wants to get rid of Addie, and I don't know what she'd do about Gilly's schooling if he did.
I see. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, why don't we make it out for $10,000?
That's an awful lot of money.
No, but you may have some bills you've forgotten about. It's not as pretty as a diamond bracelet, but...
I'll pay you back. I promise I will.
You just promise me one thing. That you'll call me any time you're in trouble. Will you remember that?
That was how I got the check. I wasn't proud of myself for it, but I had nothing to be ashamed of either.
Mrs. Raiden, was there anything illicit in your relationship with Jack Wentworth?
No, nothing.
Did you love your husband?
Yes.
Were you unfaithful to him in any way?
No, never.
Mrs. Raiden, isn't it a fact that you brought your husband a glass of warm milk every evening?
Yes, I did.
Did you put poison in that glass of milk the night he died?
No, I didn't.
Are you sure?
I swear I didn't.
No further questions.
Your witness, Mr. Halstead.
Mrs. Raiden, you know your husband died of a lethal dose of aconitine.
Yes.
Tincture of aconitine is found in certain liniment preparations. It was contained in a product called K944, used in the treatment of skin ailments in animals. Are you familiar with this product?
Yes.
You own a dog, I believe.
Yes.
You recently purchased some of this K944, didn't you?
The vet recommended it.
However, the bottle you purchased was never found in the house. Do you know what became of it?
I can't imagine what happened to it.
But you know what happened to some of it, don't you? You used some of it to kill Howard Raiden.
I didn't. I had no reason to kill Howard.
No reason. No reason at all.
Objection. Objection sustained. Please do not lead the witness, Mr. Halstead.
Mrs. Raiden, what was the name of your first husband?
Gary Mitchell.
At the time you met him, he was an employee of Howard Raiden, wasn't he?
Yes.
They didn't get along very well, did they? As a matter of fact, Howard Raiden fired your first husband, didn't he?
I don't see what that has to do.
How old were you at the time of that first marriage?
17.
Ah. Only 17. And how long had you been married when Gary Mitchell was killed in that wreck?
4 months.
Naturally, that disturbed you very much.
Of course.
In fact, you had another reason to be unhappy, didn't you?
Yes. I was very unhappy, yes.
Not only because your husband had died, but because he had left you with a child. Isn't that true, Mrs. Raiden? Here's a copy of the birth certificate. It proves that you gave birth to a child 6 months after the death of your first husband. Would you like to see it? So, you were a widow at 17 with a baby you didn't really want.
I did want him. But I couldn't take care of him. I had to find work. I didn't know what to do.
Yes, it was hard, wasn't it? All that responsibility on someone young and all alone. You needed help. So you turned to the best friend you had. You let Adelaide Strain look after your child, and you went off to work as a fashion model.
I was only studying to be a model. I wasn't trained. I was making hardly any money at all. The hours were long, and Addie offered to take care of Gilly for me.
And when you started seeing Howard Raiden, you never told him about the baby.
I couldn't. I just couldn't.
Of course you couldn't. That would have spoiled everything, wouldn't it?
I meant to tell him someday.
But you never did. You were afraid he wouldn't marry you if he knew about the child, especially a child of Gary Mitchell's, a man he despised. So you let Adelaide Strain raise the boy as her own, until you could bring them both into your home.
I wanted my baby with me.
But Howard Raiden thought the boy was Adelaide Strain's, didn't he? And he told Mrs. Strain he didn't want her to work for you anymore. Isn't that what happened? Didn't he fire her?
Yes.
And if Adelaide Strain was forced to go, your son would have gone too?
Yes.
And that's why you had to kill your husband, wasn't it? That's the real reason.
I didn't kill him.
That's all, Mrs. Raiden.
It is now your duty to weigh these arguments and the testimony of the witnesses you've heard in order to determine whether the defendant is innocent or guilty of the charge of first-degree murder. In order to reach that decision, I remind you again that a conviction for the crime of murder requires evidence of both opportunity and motive. You must be convinced that the defendant, Eve Raiden, had adequate opportunity to commit the act which resulted in the death of her husband. And you must be satisfied that the prosecution has shown just cause for that crime to be committed. If you believe there is a reasonable doubt, then you must return a verdict of not guilty. If you believe that both opportunity and motive have been proved, it is your duty to find the defendant guilty as charged. The jury will now retire to consider their verdict.
Why didn't you tell me the truth? Why did I have to learn it from the prosecution?
I couldn't. Eve made me
You
promise.
knew the most important fact of all, and you kept your mouth shut. Do you know what you've done to our case? If I had known the truth, I could have fought back. Now it's too late. You've handed them the one thing they didn't have before, the motive.
But she didn't kill him. She didn't kill him.
There are 12 people in that jury room. Tell it to them. It'll be a miracle if they believe it now.
How long has the jury been out?
That's about 6 hours now.
I shouldn't have listened to Eve. I should have told them about Gilly.
Oh, don't blame yourself. I'm sure you did what Eve wanted.
I never thought they'd find out. All these years, no one ever guessed. You don't blame her, Jack. She was trying to make a home for Gilly. She always intended telling Howard. But he proved so impossible.
No, I don't blame her, Eddie. I just feel so helpless. Hello? Oh, yes, Mr. Malloy. About what time did you say? Oh, fine. Thank you very much. Good night. Well, the jury is locked up for tonight. We won't know anything until tomorrow morning, if then.
They're going to convict her.
I don't know, Eddie. I just don't know. Look, why don't I stop by around 9 in the morning and we'll both go to court together? Good night, Eddie.
No. No.
Gilly, what's the matter?
Mr. Raiden. Mr. Raiden's after me.
Oh, no, Gilly, it's just a dream.
I was in his room. He came after me.
Shh, Gilly, shh.
I couldn't move. My legs couldn't move.
No, Gilly, it was just a dream. Just an awful nightmare. Come on. You lie down and go to sleep now. There's nothing for you to be afraid of anymore. Nothing.
Mom? 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 Sarah! Sarah!
Of course, I'll have to report this to the police. You understand that?
Yes, I know. Is she going to be all right, Doctor?
Well, luckily, the poison she took was a slow-acting one. Yes, she'll be all right.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Doctor.
Mr. Wentworth.
Oh, yes?
She left this note in her room. It's addressed to Mrs. Radin.
Oh, well, I'll take it. Oh, by the way, where is Gilly?
He's up in his room. I'll take very good care of him, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
My dear Steve, it's not enough to say I'm sorry. Not when I've made you suffer so much. I really thought it would be all right. I kept hoping and praying all through the trial. 1,000 times I wanted to stand up and shout for them to stop, to tell them the truth, that I killed Howard. I did it for all of us. Please believe me. I just wanted us to be happy. You and me and Gilly, to be together always. I thought that they would blame Howard's death on his illness. And then they arrested you. And I knew that I hadn't solved anything. I'd only made things worse. You've always been so kind to me.
I know you'll be kind now and forgive me for what I've done. Take care of your boy, Eve. He needs you so much. Well, Mr. Halstead?
I'm satisfied, Your Honor.
You'll agree, then, that the jury be dismissed?
By all means.
Then it's over?
It's over. Not for Mrs. Strain, I'm afraid.
Mr. Malloy, what's going to happen to Addie?
I don't know. I'll do everything I can to help her.
May I see my son now?
You're free to go whenever you wish, Mrs. Radin.
Come on, Eve. I'll take you home.
Would you mind dropping me off?
Not at all. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Your Honor.
Bye.
Bye.
Mr. Malloy, thank you so much.
Mr. Halstead, you seem a trifle disturbed.
Your Honor, that jury would have brought in a verdict of guilty. Wouldn't they?
That, Counselor, is something we'll never know.
You have now seen the whole of what really happened. We shall cross-examine you later. By the way, Mrs. Strain was subsequently tried and found guilty. She hoped for a suspended sentence, but unfortunately, they suspended her. My two stalwart heroes are no longer partners. The split-up was entirely friendly, however. You see, this way they can represent both sides of a case. Defending the underdog is fine, but it's usually the upper dog who can pay the big fees. Next week, the Alfred Hitchcock Hour will bring you another story. Some previews of this will follow the following.